here's the boss guide to Sergeant Hammer. You're welcome. So, you want to play Sergeant Hammer like a boss? Well, my friend, you've come to the right place. However, first of all, you better make sure you know what you're getting yourself into when you pick Sergeant Hammer. This hero is a futuristic space war tank with massive guns, pulverizes her enemies like a wrecking ball on a house of cards, and is named after something that smashes puny objects, aka her opponents. Now, if you still think you can handle that, keep watching. Otherwise, just go play somebody else. Alright, starting off, let's go over Sergeant Hammer's skills and tips for them. Your first Q ability is Spider Mines. This ability allows you to lay down 3 mines that activate when an enemy walks near, dealing damage and slowing them. These mines are great for scouting bushes, watching for ganks, and protecting your position. This ability also has a low mana cost, so you should be laying down mines constantly. Your second W ability is Concussive Blast. Sergeant Hammer blasts enemies in a small cone-shaped area in front of her, dealing medium damage and knocking enemies back a medium distance. This ability should be saved for disengaging opponents that get too close to you during fights. It can also serve to help you clear enemy minion waves outside of fights. Your third E ability is Siege Mode. Sergeant Hammer becomes immobile and gets a significant range increase on her auto attacks, as well as a splash effect and bonus damage against minions and structures. This ability is one of the best in the game for pushes and minion clear, because the range increase allows you to fire on fortifications while staying out of range of any towers or forts, and the bonus damage and splash will have you melting any size minion wave. However, it's important to remember that this ability is a double-edged sword, since you sacrifice all your mobility. Because of this, Siege Mode is not great in team fights, especially since it doesn't give you bonus damage when attacking enemy heroes. Sieging up in teamfights can be an unnecessary handicap, so unless your team is trying to defend a position, save Siege Mode for pushes. Now, your last and ultimate ability is Napalm Strike. We'll just be using this skill for the build. This ability allows you to fire off a missile that deals damage in an area and leaves a small patch of napalm that deals damage every second to enemies standing on it. This skill has an extremely low cooldown, low mana cost, and huge range, which provides you with an incredible amount of safe, sustained damage during fights and pushes. Spam this ability to wear down opponents from afar and melt minion waves and enemy fortifications. Your trait is Artillery. It gives your basic attacks a percentage damage increase when you attack distant enemies. Basically, any target that is about half your normal range or greater away will take 20% more damage from your auto attacks. Now, this might not seem like much at first, but Sergeant Hammer has one of the highest, if not the highest, base damage in the game. As the game goes on, this damage increase becomes more and more significant as your base damage grows. Now, your mount ability is unique. Instead of mounting a horse, what is this, the Middle Ages or something? Sergeant Hammer extends a pair of jetpacks and moves extremely fast for a short duration. Welcome to the future! This ability has a relatively long cooldown, however it's one of the best in the game for repositioning during a fight or escaping a fight or gank. You should make sure that this ability is up if you feel like there's even a slight chance that you'll need to make a quick getaway, such as before a team fight, or if you're moving into a position that could be ganked. Now onto talents and gameplay. Early game talents at level 1 get Advanced Artillery. This talent upgrades your trait and tacks on extra damage to your auto attacks on distant targets. You won't feel the real impact of this until mid-game, but getting this talent first will set you up for incredible basic attack damage later in the game. At level 4, go for Vampiric Assault. This talent heals you for a percentage of damage dealt from your auto attacks. It synergizes well with your already high base attack damage, and being able to heal yourself up gives you a much needed way to sustain and survive out on the battlefield. At level 7, go for Hyper Cooling Engines. This talent significantly reduces the cooldown of your thrusters ability, and keeps them active when you are healing at your altar. It frees you up significantly to use thrusters to get around the map, to get to important objectives or lanes, because the cooldown will often refresh when you need it again to escape. It's an important supplement to your subpar mobility and your ability to move quickly around the map. Alright, now onto early game gameplay. While you are laning in the early game, you should for the most part stay in lane, get experience, and do some light harassing, but don't take many risks in lane. Use mines constantly to secure your perimeters, especially in bushes or openings to your lane. Avoid using siege mode in lane unless you have another teammate with you, and even then, use it sparingly just to zone out your opponents. When sieged, always be ready to escape using thrusters and always have a set of mines placed right in front of you. Focus on getting experience in the early game since you get a huge power spike at level 10 once you get your heroic ability, so you'll want to reach it as fast as possible. However, don't hesitate to leave your lane and join teamfights, especially when they're brewing around important map objectives. In teamfights, it can be tempting to siege up, but resist the urge and stay on your wheels. Remember that siege mode does not increase hero damage, and the only benefit in fights is the range and the little extra splash damage, which is negligible in the early game and it's not worth becoming a sitting duck. Instead, lay down mines, auto attack whoever you can reach while staying on the outskirts of the fight. If you get engaged on or find yourself deep in the middle of the fight, use concussive blast to disengage and activate thrusters to reposition yourself out of danger. Now onto mid-game talents. At level 10, go for Napalm Strike. Your heroic ability gives you a huge power spike, allowing you to do heavy damage from a safe distance away due to its long range. In teamfights, you'll be able to heavily damage enemies you normally wouldn't be able to reach with basic attacks, and during pushes, napalms will make short work of any size minion wave and deal heavy damage to enemy structures. You'll also be able to take down mercenary camps significantly faster, or even by yourself if needed. At level 13, get First Strike. This talent gives you another huge boost on top of your already boosted basic attacks as long as you haven't taken damage for a few seconds. This talent synergizes well with Hammer's playstyle because in teamfights, you should already be avoiding damage by staying behind your team and staying on the outskirts. This talent rewards you with even more damage for great positioning. The other impact of this talent is during siege pushes or when you need to defend your base against enemy pushes. In these situations, you should already be sieged at a relatively safe location where you won't be taking incoming damage, and having this damage boost on top of your siege damage boost and your advanced artillery damage boost will compound your damage off the charts. A quick estimate, at level 13 you'll be doing around 215 damage, plus 20% boost from your artillery trait, plus another 10% boost from your advanced artillery talent, plus 30% boost from siege mode, plus another 25% boost on top of all of that from First Strike equals, I don't know, I thought this was a game, not my math assignment. Giant Killer is worth mentioning here too because it's arguably a strong choice at level 13. However, I almost always prefer First Strike because Giant Killer does nothing for your pushing ability, which is a big part of Sergeant Hammer's gameplay, and the damage boost is comparable to what you get from First Strike. Now onto mid-game gameplay. In the mid-game, your damage output increases dramatically, meaning that you'll want to be at every team fight to turn up the heat. Sergeant Hammer is all about bringing heavy sustained damage, so the longer a team fight goes, the more damage you can output. Much like early game, it's still much better to stay on your wheels rather than to siege in a team fight, so unless your team is trying to hold a position, stay on your wheels. Position yourself on the outskirts of the fight and throw napalms onto your enemy as you auto attack whoever you can hit without putting yourself in danger. The sweet spot for you in team fights is to stay within or preferably behind your team's front lines. Lay mines down to cover your flanks and save concussive blast and thrusters for if things go bad and you need to disengage or reposition. Just pay close attention to enemies with roots or stuns. Your thrusters can get you alive out of almost any bad situation as long as you aren't rooted or stunned. If you need to retreat and are being chased by your enemies, you can drop napalms on your enemies as you are retreating. This can sometimes even force your opponents to stop pursuing you, or at the very least, soften them up and set up potential turnaround kills. Outside of fights, look for opportunities to push your enemy's base. This is where your siege mode shines. You excel at clearing minions and fortifications, and nothing will survive long under the combined damage of your siege mode and napalm strikes. This also goes for defending if your base is getting pushed. When you are pushing, be very careful of enemy ganks. Don't push alone. Drop mines to watch areas that you can be ganked from, and keep track of enemy movements on the minimap. Now onto late game talents. At level 16, go for Hover Siege mode. This ability will allow you to move slowly in siege mode, and it enables you to slow push your enemies, which is Sergeant Hammer's deadliest tactic. Do this by creeping forward in siege mode with your team while pushing into your enemy's base. It puts your opponents in a terrible position and forces them to either react or lose forts. Being able to move around in siege mode also opens you up to using siege mode during fights to utilize the range of siege mode to stay a safe distance away or to reach enemies' back lines. At level 20, get Advanced Lava Strikes. This will increase the range and impact damage of your napalm strikes. This range increase is unreal and a lot of fun because it makes it so that nothing on your screen is safe from napalms during teamfights and pushes. Now onto late game gameplay. In the late game, your sustained damage is unmatched, and it's important to roam with your team so you don't get caught in a gank or miss out on an important team fight. Teamfights in the late game play much like mid game, with one exception. That is, sieging up is now viable with hover siege mode, but make sure you are in a relatively safe position such as behind your team's front line or surrounded by your team, and then start smashing. Light up your enemies with napalms and drop mines every chance you have. Remember that you are a priority target for your enemies, so always be ready at a moment's notice to disengage and thrusters away to safety if enemies start to close in on you. If the fight gets scattered, unsiege and stick with your team's warriors or supports. Outside of team fights, rally your team to push and especially look for potential deathball slow push opportunities. These deathball pushes with Sergeant Hammer typically involve your entire team barreling down a lane with 1 or 2 mercenary camps behind you and a good sized minion wave. Siege up and creep forward with hover siege mode. You'll be forcing your opponents into a lose-lose situation because either they engage onto you and your entire team while you're sieged, or if they don't engage, they'll quickly lose all of their forts. Alright, now that's it for this Bouse Guide to Sergeant Hammer. Get out there, dazzle your team, and wreck your enemies because that's what Bouse Hammer is all about. And on a real note, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and find it both helpful and entertaining. If you like this and want to see more, show some love by liking, commenting, maybe sharing your own success or failure stories with the guide, and of course, subscribing.